Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me. Today is Monday, so we do our Freight Broker Bootcamp Live, but today is a special episode. I'm going to be interviewing a friend of mine who did a freight broker startup, and their first year in business did $1 million in sales during what everybody else was screaming as a freight recession, and that the sky was falling and you can't make any money as a freight brokerage. And as a true startup, she did over $1 million in sales. We're going to talk to her today. But before we do that, hit me up in the comments with the city and state you're logging in from. We're going to let some people get live. So here's how it's going to work. I'm going to do some quick shout outs. Then we're going to do the interview. And then the best part is we're going to stick around. She's going to stick around as well as myself. We're going to do Q&A at the end. Okay. So if you have questions, you can stick around to the end and we'll do some live Q&A. All right. So that's what we're going to do today. Thank you for joining me. Truly appreciated it. If you're catching this on replay, hit me up in the comments with the hashtag replay. I love to hear from my replay folks. I know sometimes you can't make it live for the whole thing or even part of it. So let's do some shout outs. Carl from Bethlehem, Georgia, welcome. North Transfer from Minnesota, welcome. Corey from Billings, Montana, as usual. Brian from Independence, Oregon, welcome. Michael Killian from Los Angeles, senior that is. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much. We're going to let some people get live. Again, we're streaming this not only on LinkedIn, but on YouTube as well as Facebook. So let's hear from everybody in the comments, the city and state you're logging in from. Myself, if you're not aware, born and raised in Western New York. I'm in the Clarence, New York area, just outside of Buffalo. Started my freight brokerage back in 2003. Was very blessed, grew that business to over $80 million a year in sales and sold that company. But along the way, I started freightbrokerbootcamp.com, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker and freight agent training program for startups. Okay. I've had that program for hold on. Is that better? I think I lost my somehow I lost my mic real quick. Can you guys hear me? Let's do a quick sound. Do a quick sound check. Can you hear me? Okay. So Christina, you can hear me? Okay. All right, cool. There we go. I must have somehow, I'm going to try to be very, I'm going to try not to touch the mic, people. For some reason, I think it's possessed and has decided that it doesn't want to be touched. So we're going to steer clear of the mic. All right. So again, thank you guys for joining me. Today we're going to talk, it's a special episode. We're going to do an interview with a friend of mine who did a freight broker startup recently, and their first year as a freight broker during what everybody was calling a freight recession did $1 million in sales. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about kind of why she got started. We're going to talk about how she got her first customers. We're going to talk about some of her biggest challenges. Maybe we'll talk about some of the software that she likes. Maybe we'll talk about what she would do differently. I mean, we're going to cover a bunch of different topics, and she's going to kind of look back on that startup journey, as painful as that can be. And we're going to kind of pull off that Band-Aid, and hopefully she's going to be able to share some insights with you to not only inspire you, but also give you some tips that you can use to try to build your own brokerage. Okay. Tej Sethi from Toronto, and Scott. Yes, he can hear me. Good. All right. John can hear me. All right. So everybody can hear me now. Cool. All right, guys. So without further ado, this is my friend, Christina Booker. Christina is the owner and CEO and founder of Booker Transport. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you. Booker Transport Solutions.
There you go. Booker Transport
There's another Booker Transport. That's not me.
Okay. Booker Transport Solutions. All right, cool. Sorry about that. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here. You know, we were catching up a little bit before we went live here. But you've been very, very busy. It's the holiday season. And so there's extra work on your plate beyond being an entrepreneur. You're a mother, you're a wife, you got a lot of things going on. Before we kind of peel the onion back and start diving into, you know, kind of the nitty gritty of the business, could you tell me, I mean, I know you had some experience in brokerage and logistics and transportation before you started your business, but what was it What was the primary reason why you decided to start Booker Transport Solutions?
I think, in my career, I got to a point where I was looking for that next step. I felt as if I hit a ceiling at my W-2 that I was at. I've been in all the roles from entry-level freight broker with no business to business development, back to freight broker. I did some training for a while. So it just felt like, well, I was looking for that next step. And I essentially had two routes. I can become a freight agent, or I can start my own brokerage, or I can go and do the W-2 thing at another brokerage, right?
Mhm.
So what made sense the most for me, and this is, I feel like, is an individual choice, right, in your freight brokerage career, was to start my own MC. It was very scary, but that's the route that I took. And here I am a year later. And it's a little surreal that I'm here and I'm alive and kicking and doing real well. But it's been quite the journey.
Yeah. So when did your MC officially go live? Do you have a date or a month on that?
Yeah, so my MC officially went live in October of
Okay.
2023. I
2023.
was not operational until April. I didn't announce that I started my company until April,
April of 2024?
April of 2024.
Wow. So it hasn't even been a year
Uh,
since you were operational.
yeah, since I was operational, it has not even been a year.
Wow. Okay. So
Technically,
geez,
like
that's
9
only
months.
that's only like 8 months.
Yeah.
Okay. So in 8 months of being operational, share with everybody kind of what you did in revenue and maybe a little bit about maybe the profit margins. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I hit my first million. I have been looking at that number. That was my goal. Well, my goal was like 600,000. I remember I wrote it down specifically in my journal, and when I wrote it down, I said to myself, I just don't know how I'm going to be able to hit this. There's so many things, so many obstacles that were jumping at me when I started my MC.
Right.
But I wrote that down, and on the 18th of this month, in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning, I got my last load, and I was like, I think that's it. So I jumped in there and I was like, I think I just hit $1 million. And I was like, yes. Really excited. But
Wow.
that felt a little surreal. So yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you had a goal of 600. You're only 8 months into that first year and you already hit a million. So you're probably going to double that goal, what you originally had.
I like to look at every day, every week, every month as kind of a fresh slate, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I did that, but I don't by any means say to myself, like, just because I did that this year, right? What's to say if I don't keep working hard and I don't keep grinding, I don't keep hustling, I'm going to hit that again next year, right? There's so many different circumstances when it comes to the freight world. I mean, one of the things that pushed me to that million was a project that kind of came out of nowhere.
Hmm.
And that project was one of those things where I was freaking out because I was like, am I going to be able to do this? And I think something in my head said, this is what you wanted. This is what you've been asking for, right? This is your moment to shine. If you can't make this work, you're not going to be able to do this. So I said, okay, one way or another, I'm going to do it. And it came as a surprise, but I made it work. And after that project, it went smoothly. I secured that shipper, I secured that customer, and they've slowed down, so it's one of those things that's just constantly,
Yeah. The
constantly.
key there is this is what you said, the past doesn't always equal the future, but the fact is now you're like in business and in life, you're kind of like a rubber band, right? And when that rubber band is stretched, it never goes back to the exact same shape, even though it looks like it does. You've stretched yourself and you've already overcome some of those initial hurdles of startup and paying carriers and kind of moving the loads and having the confidence and all the things that go along with that. So, I mean, I have no doubts. I know you're being conservative, but let's talk a little bit about your profit margins. I mean, I don't need to know your profit bottom line or anything, but we know that most brokers are somewhere typically in the 10 to 20% range. I mean, are you doing a more full truckload? Are you doing more LTL? Are you doing partials? I mean, and then talk to us a little bit about your margins.
Yeah, I think that I come from a background where I'm consistently used to 15, 20% profit margins.
Yep.
That was what I aimed for. I was happy with that, right? Coming into this, I knew I would have to start out lower. So I think I started out at like 8%, moved that up to 10% slowly, with some trust with a couple of my customers. And I think I ended at like 12%.
So blended, you were kind of in that 10 to 12% range.
Right.
Perfect. All right, great. Well, that's amazing. I mean, here, listen, you got to get your foot in the door, right? You got to develop those relationships. You've got to build your systems. You got to get all those onboard, all those carriers, right? Those are all brand new relationships. I mean, you didn't have all those relationships coming in the door. So I think, it makes a lot of sense on the front end when you're getting new customers, kind of bring the margins down. And then over time, as you increase your value to them, there are other opportunities, those margins can slowly go up, and you're probably not going to have an issue getting into that 15% range over time. I mean, is
Yeah.
that kind of the plan?
Oh, definitely. I mean, like I said, I do come from that background of that 15%. It was always pushed on us from a management standpoint, like, hey,
Yep.
let's try to get 15%. 12 is absolute minimum. But I didn't, I knew I couldn't necessarily go into that with a brand new MC starting my book of business from scratch. Like I'm a big believer that you have to grow trust with customers, and you have to get your foot in the door. You have to show them your worth, show them your value, and that's done through action. So there was no way that for me, it didn't make any sense for me to my rates would be higher than the market is at right now, right? Or what it was when I started.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about that is that as a startup, yes, you have some startup cost, right? I mean, you got some load boards and you got some software and you got your phone and you got those basic things, right? But as a general rule, your expenses are very low, which gives you the flexibility to keep your margins a little bit down, as opposed to a large brokerage who has a lot of fixed overhead,
Exactly.
who, if they're not in that 15 to 20% range, right? They're really not putting anything to the bottom line, depending upon, their model or depending upon the type of overhead that they have. But larger companies have a lot more fixed overhead. Smaller companies have a lot more flexibility because they don't have that fixed overhead. So that's one of the advantages in a startup realm, is that you don't have to charge 15 or 20%, or, like larger brokers like to do, because you have that smaller overhead. So, I mean, that's an advantage. That's an advantage for you. I mean, you took advantage of it too, to make
I
sure
did.
that you were able to hit your numbers.
I did, and my customers were very happy with my rates, and so I
Yeah.
was like, "Okay, well, we're getting somewhere." Another thing, I'm glad you brought up the expenses, is because I was honestly a little surprised of how low the total expenses at the end of the month were. Like, if I calculated my monthly costs, because I did that at the end of every single month, I did my monthly cost, my total cost so far, and I was like, "Okay, they're not bad." Of
Yeah.
course, I want the best tech. I want the data, I want the analytics, but when it comes to like the groundwork of actually getting your brokerage up and running, the costs are not that high.
No, not bad at all. Especially when you compare them to opening a franchise, or opening, even if you're opening a pizza shop, a restaurant. I mean, you're going to need 40, 50, 60,000 or more just to get the doors open. Whereas with a brokerage, it's pretty easy to get up and running and started for 5 to 10 grand, depending upon your credit. And then obviously you've got to be able to cash flow whatever your expenses are. But let's talk a little bit about your niche. I mean, I know that your family has a family owned business, which is separate from the brokerage. So there's some things there, but talk to me a little bit about your niche. I mean, what did you focus in on? Or did you go a little bit more broad? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I come from a generalist background. And when I
Mhm.
say that, it's because most of my shippers were enterprise, like packaging, food and beverage. I did a lot of dry vans. I did some flatbeds, but I didn't, coming into this, like that's one of the mistakes I think I made, was not necessarily honing in on a particular equipment type, particular region. I later learned that, and now I try to figure out, okay, what problems do I solve the most every single day? Like, aside from what I've done for the last 8 years, what am I doing this year? And the problems I'm solving are like those last minute 911, hey, I need a truck in the next hour. Like, that's all I've done this year.
Mm.
And I maybe had like 2 RFPs and didn't win anything, but I had a shipper come back to me and say, hey, we had a carrier fall off this lane. Like, is this something that you can jump in on and help with? And that was because they had one load every 2 weeks. Like, you can't expect a carrier to hold on to that rate without the volume, right? So
Right.
that's where a broker came in handy, and I was there. But now I would say expedited 911. I'm doing a lot of oversized. I'm doing a lot of flatbeds, which was a learning curve for me. I'm primarily in the Southeast, real hot Nashville. So as far as the FTL, LTL world, the TMS that I'm using, the software that I'm using, is plugged into contract rates with all the LTL providers. And I didn't have that before. And I had a lot of requests to do LTL. And that's one of the reasons I went with Quote Factory. So both FTL, LTL, Southeast, flatbed, oversized, 911.
Gotcha. So see, if you guys are listening carefully here, okay, Christina's background when she was working in a brokerage and logistics was a lot of van enterprise stuff, right? That's what she did a lot of. And she came in and started her brokerage. She probably thought that might be some of what she's going to do, but ultimately what ended up happening is the niche kind of evolved more into that, what she just described to you, right? Because that's probably wasn't what you did a lot of in your prior work. I mean, you probably did some of that.
I did some, but I mean, a lot of my customers depended on me for those contract. I had the ability to build strong carrier relationships with contract carriers for a specific lane that would run high volume throughout every single quarter or through peak season, right? And they depended on me for that. So I grew that. But coming into this, like, large enterprise shippers are wary of new MCs. They're wary, like, no matter how much experience, I could scream and shout all day, hey, have almost a decade of experience. It's like, okay, what does your MC look like?
Right.
Can you hold on to, can you pay your bills? Can you give us 60-day payment terms, right? And it just wasn't, while it may have been a fit for a brokerage that's 10 plus years, it wasn't a fit for me. So I had to go out and evolve my fit. I had to go out and evolve my niche. Part of that is like being flexible, being adaptable. That's so huge in this industry.
Yeah. And so you fell a little bit more into the spot market. You did a lot more project freight like you had talked about before. But the good part is now you've got that experience, right? Now you've got that, you've kind of built that playbook. And so you can kind of scale that out. And that doesn't mean just because that's your niche, doesn't mean you can't add other niches over time, right? People confuse what I say. I'm a big believer riches, are in niches, right? I believe that new freight brokers should niche down and should then strategically expand from there. I've seen people do it both ways, right? I've seen particularly people like you who have a lot of background experience do it that way, where they've kind of continued that generalist, type of approach. But new freight brokers and freight agents, rarely do I see them trying to play the generalist role where they have a lot of success, because it's like drinking from a fire hose. They're trying to learn everything about every market and every piece of equipment and every geography, and nothing sinks in, and all you do is get hit in the face with water all day and you come back with empty pockets, right? Yeah. So I think niching down is an important part of that, but then you can strategically expand. So you had a lot of benefits with your past experience, kind of knowing some of those industries. And so I'm glad that you were able to navigate that. And it sounds like you've kind of really niched yourself into a spot where your customers are enjoying it and you're able to deliver, at a high level.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, I came into this thinking, okay, well, I'll just continue what I've been doing, as I've just been kind of a mini expert in so many things. And I learned that I was like, well, I just need to answer some questions for myself so that I know who it is that I need to prospect. Because when I first started, I mean, I was calling everybody and anybody, I was doing all the things, thought I was doing all the right things. I mean, I was just driving myself crazy with like cold calls and cold emails and how to prospect. And I was trying to learn sales and more of sales, even though from what I knew. And I was like, okay, Christina, you can't be a freight broker without freight. You have a non-solicit. You can't go after your customers. You have to start fresh. So the starting fresh part was probably the hardest, but
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. You brought that up, so I think that's interesting. Let's talk about the experience in the circumstances around the first shipper that you moved your first load for, because I'm sure you remember that, right? Everybody remembers that fondly. Mine was over 20 years ago, and I still remember who it was and where the shipment was. So talk to us a little bit about that. How did that relationship start? How did it kind of transition through those early stages, and maybe even where is it today?
Yeah, so it was actually a referral. I was working hard prospecting and cold calling, and I did see some results from that, obviously. But it was a referral, and it was one of those things out of the blue, like, hey, we have, I think it was like this large milling machine of some sort coming out of Minnesota, going down to Georgia, and it was like last minute Friday, at 3 p.m. make it work. And I was like, yes, I can do this. I gave them a rate. They were really quick to say, do it, book it. I booked it and I said, yes, just made my first dollar.
How did the referral come about? Was it a friend? Was it a carrier? Was it another shipper? I mean, how did the referral come about, if you don't mind me asking?
It was a friend.
Yep.
So, yep, I've got a lot of friends in the industry, luckily, been able to maintain really good relationships. So that's kind of how it came about. And it
Perfect.
was just a one-time shipment. It wasn't a long-term customer. My
Mhm.
long-term customers actually did come from cold calling and prospecting. And of course, I've gotten some referrals after that as well. But yeah, it's just a mix.
So from there on, after that referral, if you had to talk about the strategy that landed you the most customers, was it referrals? Was it cold email? Was it cold calling? Was it more face to face, doing outreach, walking on the docks? I mean, if you had to point to one that was kind of your primary that drove the most revenue, what would that be?
I would say it would be a mix of face to face plus personalized outreach. I, especially in the market that we've had in the last, going on 3 years now, cold calling wasn't getting me very far. I've
Mhm.
seen some success, but I was, felt like I was under pressure to go ahead and start getting freight rolling in. So actually got in my car and I spent like an entire day just driving around Tennessee, Chattanooga, obviously. Went down to Dalton, Georgia, found, and I just started dropping off cups that said Booker on it and my phone number and my cards. So I've had some success with that. Obviously, people were like, "Don't need anybody, but thanks for coming by," right?
Right.
And then just LinkedIn has been crucial in the prospecting efforts. Obviously, just reaching out, them being able to see, who I am, my background, if they were to go on my profile or whatnot. So that those two things combined, especially keeping it personalized, has helped a ton.
So face to face, just kind of doing a drop in. You go to an industrial park, or you go to an area where there's a lot of manufacturing, and you're just dropping in to the front desk, or maybe you're squeezing around the back to the dock and trying to make your way in, and
Yeah.
just trying to develop some relationships that way, get your foot in the door. And then LinkedIn was a big part of it. Now, you said cold calling wasn't as fruitful. Did you do, when you say customized, outreach, is that where you're talking more about like LinkedIn, where, hey, listen, you're sending a connection request to a shipper and then you're kind of developing a little bit of a rapport with them that way? Or what do you mean by more custom type relationship? I mean, or
Well,
outreach? Is that email? Is that more? Can you peel the onion back on that a little bit for us?
sure. So, I mean, I think a part of it is doing a lot of research, not a lot of research. It only takes like 2 to 3 minutes to know, like, hey, is this somebody that would be a decision maker, right?
Right.
Is this somebody that potentially has freight? Do they even use a freight broker or need one? So all those things you go into when you're looking for the person that you need to speak with. You have that in the back of your mind, and you can ask those questions head on if you don't already know them. I've had just being straightforward with people helps a ton instead of just, hey, pitch, pitch, pitch. Like I'm essentially, hey, I need your freight. Obviously, yes. So does me and every other broker in the industry right now, right?
Right.
So just saying, this is what I do. This is my experience. I see you move machinery. I just moved a load down the street from you. Something like that will get a shipper's attention versus just a blanket.
Yeah. So you were gathering sales intelligence about the company, about the product, maybe about the person on LinkedIn, and then you were crafting a little bit of a customized outreach to them in order to try to build quick rapport.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Gotcha.
I even went, I went a little deeper into that, and I was driving myself crazy because I was doing so much research on people before I started reaching out, because I just wanted to make it like apparent that I do care about their time. I do care about their freight. And I wanted to, I believe in great first impressions, right? I think that if a shipper runs across you and you give them that, they have a good feeling about you, they're more likely to engage in a conversation. So, but I got overwhelmed with that, and I was like, I just need to keep it short and sweet. Just let them know that you're here for them if they don't have anything, and don't keep bombarding them with your pitch, right? But then again, I also believe strongly in like the art of follow-ups. You got to stay on people's minds if you want to be a part of their business, if you want to be a partner for them. So it's just a combination of everything, really.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Well, that's awesome. So talk to us. You mentioned earlier when we were talking, you talked about having cutting edge software. You talked about your TMS. What would be the one piece of software that you think had the most impact on the growth that you've seen over your first year? I mean, whether that be some sort of a CRM, or whether it was a TMS, or maybe it was some sort of lead database like an Apollo or Zoom Info. Anything, any software that you use that you think had the biggest impact on your success year one?
I would say my TMS, so that would be Quote Factory, and they are kind of a startup as well. So I went into that a little hesitant, but I also knew like, hey, if this wasn't going to work out, we could look at other options. There are options out there. But the
Mhm.
fact that they had that LTL software built in, and one of my first shippers, what was a distribution company that shipped 5, 6 LTL orders, and the customer or the prospect at the time was looking for a new broker, and I was like, wait a minute, I can make this work. So the puzzle pieces fit, and it pushed me forward with volume. It was a great way for me to stay organized. Really simple when I had that project come in, for me to duplicate shipments when I needed to, for me just to keep my carriers in one place. So I would say that was a
Perfect.
big
All
part.
right, so we're kind of dialing in. We've been peeling the onion back a little bit. You've been sharing a lot of great info. So my question now is, as we kind of move towards wrapping up here in the next few minutes, what was your biggest challenge? I mean, what was that thing that, maybe it was month one or month 3 or 6, somewhere along the line in this first year of launching your business here, that just kind of came out of left field and you weren't quite sure if you were going to be able to overcome it? I mean, what was the biggest challenge?
Um, Honestly, I think my mindset was probably the biggest challenge. I tried to recreate what I had with a 10-year plus brokerage that I was with, right? I tried to recreate the volume. I tried to recreate the profit margins and the relationships. And I think that being in a place where I had to evolve my thinking into the starting point and not necessarily the middle point, like I have to grow into that, right? So that was hard for me, because I come from high volume, right? And then I started at no volume. I started at no revenue. So just that scary point that when before you get those first few loads or that project or whatnot, thinking, am I going to be able to make this work? So that was difficult, I think. But once you have proof, once you give yourself proof that, hey, not only can I make this work, but I can actually grow, right? And so I think that was definitely part of it.
Yeah, especially you coming out of a high volume brokerage where you had enterprise clients, where you were probably moving 10 or 20 or 30 or more loads a day, through the clients that you were managing, you know, and then falling back to walking in and there's no loads on the load board and you're like, oh my God, what am I doing
Right.
today?
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
kind of how it was. And I was like,
yeah.
what did I do? Did I make a mistake?
Yeah. It kind
Looking
of
back
comes
on it
back
now,
to
I
you have to
did.
adjust your expectations, and it's kind of falls back to that crawl, walk, run strategy,
Exactly.
right? You got to crawl before you walk, you got to walk before you run. And that's the same way in business. Now, some some toddlers, and you're a mom and you already get this, some toddlers are walking at 10 months. Some toddlers don't walk until they're 14 months, right? I mean, and so everybody's a little bit different, but it sounds to me like you got off the ground pretty quickly. And I think some of that experience that you had, and then recognizing that, you're not a 10-year-old brokerage, you're not, so you got to readjust your expectations and then just build block by block by block.
Exactly.
Yeah, perfect. All right, so listen, this is going to be your last question, and then we'll kind of wrap it up, and we're going to jump into live Q&A. So I want you guys to stick around to the end for live Q&A. You can feel free to ask Christina or myself any questions. But if there was one thing you would do different, one thing that you would change, one thing that you think would have the biggest impact on you getting further faster during this first year, what would that be? I know that's a tough question, but what do you think you would do differently?
It's pretty tough. Shoot, if I could go back to the start of my career, I would not have signed a non-solicit, that's for sure. It's just, I think the most difficult part of it, I really don't know how to answer that question. I'm sorry. It was all really hard.
Yeah.
I think, I started my MC without knowing what I was really getting into. I think that I should have waited a little bit longer. I didn't quite communicate as well to my previous employer that I was starting my MC. That was definitely difficult to deal with later on. So just, it's not just so everybody knows, it is not one of those things that, hey, I'm going to dabble in and see if I can make this work. It's all in or nothing. You can't be 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? You've got to be all in. And I think that at the very beginning, I was 1 foot in, 1 foot out, trying to decide what my next move was going to be. I'm a mom. I want to work from home. I want to do this, I want to do that. I want to bring my customers, but can't. It's just know what you're signing up for, do it the right way, do it the legal way. Know you're going to get kickback. Know everybody's not going to be happy for you, but that's okay. Set some goals for yourself. Be flexible, be adaptable, and grow brick by brick. It's all brick by brick.
Yeah. Well, listen, guys, just so you guys know, I mean, Christina, again, she's a freight broker. She's a business owner. She's a wife. She's a mother of a young daughter that she has who's 2 or 3 years old. So she's got a lot on her plate. Not only that, but she started this brokerage in the middle of what everybody's screaming is a freight recession. And yes, I mean, I know markets go up and down, and, I could debate with people till, we're blue in the face about that. But she did it. She did over $1 million in sales her first year. And so could you. But the reality is you got to be committed, just like Christina said. You can't dip your toe in. You can't, this isn't a side hustle. This is a real business. So you got to take it serious, right? And if you do that, then who knows, maybe you'll be on here in a future interview if that's something that you guys be able to see some success, just like Christina. And she's well on her way. I've known Christina maybe for about 6 months now. She was really early in her business when we had first met. But I had no doubt in my mind that she was going to be here where she is today, even though she might have had a little bit of doubt. But I'm super excited for her, and I really want to thank you for jumping on today. Anything you want to share, your contact information, where people can find you, whether that be your website or somewhere on social, LinkedIn, whatever?
Sure. So you can go check out bookerfreight.com. That's just like our doing business name, but we are Booker Transport Solutions, but bookerfreight.com.
And she's always active on LinkedIn too. So reach out to her on LinkedIn.
I jump in and out. I'm trying to stay more consistent this upcoming year, so you'll see me more.
Love it. Love it. Thank you so much, Christina. Appreciate you being here.
All right. Sounds good.
All right, cool. So guys, listen, stick around. We have 26 minutes at 1:00 Eastern. Christina is out. She got a lot of things on her to-do list. I'm sure it's this long. And so we are going to jump right into live Q&A. So if you have questions for Christina, or you have questions for myself, or you want us both to answer it, let us know in the comments. Hit us up in the comments and let us know. Hit us up with those questions now. Let's try to get these questions front loaded. We may not get to all the questions today. And if we don't, I'll try to come back in later, maybe try to answer them in the thread, but it's always easier and better if you jump on this now. So whatever questions you guys have, hit us up in the comments. And if it's specifically for Christina, let her know, and we'll try to address those. So what do we got here? What do we got for, I can't even tell how many people we got live here today. Got quite a few. Cool. All right. Michael says, what was the software? Okay. So Michael Killing asks, what was the software Christina used?
It's called Quote Factory. And I think it's, let me look it up. I'm sure it's quotefactorytms.com or just quotefactory.com. It's just quotefactory.com.
Is it specifically designed for brokerage, or is it more broker and carrier?
Only startup small freight brokerages.
Gotcha. Okay. And it has the ability to handle full truckload and LTL. You just like that feature where it has the built-in LTL rating.
So it also has a shipper portal, which was huge for me because I didn't have that before, and I've always wanted that. I thought it was a great benefit to a customer, to a shipper, especially some of the smaller distribution companies who had those LTL orders. So the fact that customers can just jump in there, book their own freight, track their own shipments, golden. So I was like,
yeah, that LTL feature, by the way, just so you know, when I had my brokerage, we had built our own TMS. We had spent well over $1 million building our own TMS. And I tried to build that self-rating LTL tool in-house, and it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't know how, I don't exactly know how it works. I just know that, over this last year, I've learned so much about LTL and all the fees and everything. So it's been great. It's been a great experience, and they've done a great job with it.
Yeah. So basically the way that works, guys, is they can log into their own customer portal. They can put the zip, class, dimensions, all the basic LTL details, and they can get a list of carriers with different rates. And then it automatically adds her margin onto it because she has the ability to kind of determine that. They book it. She doesn't even touch it, right? It gets tendered to the LTL provider, right?
And obviously, like, there are larger brokerages out there that have that feature, but that absolutely keep it hands off. I jump in there and I make sure that everything is running smoothly. I make sure that these LTL carriers are doing what they're supposed to do, because trust me, if nobody is on them, they will wait to pick up a shipment 2 or 3 weeks. It's wild. The things that if you let them get away with, they will get away with it. Yeah. So that was definitely a big portion of it. Also, the thing I like about it is it's so advanced in the fact that it can calculate the freight class for you as soon as you enter your dimensions and your weight, so that you're avoiding, fees later. I know that LTL has changed quite a bit, but you're avoiding some
rating and all that.
Shippers inevitably get hit with, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. All right. Cool. All right. Here's a question. Oops. I thought I hit it. What was your net profit so far this year? I know you shared that. Just reiterate it if you would.
My net profit, I mean, it's 6 figures. I don't feel comfortable sharing it exactly.
Yeah, we were talking gross profit, right? So her gross profit was in the 10 to 12% range, right?
Yes,
for gross profit margin. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Yeah. Cool. Here's a question from Mark. Happy for you. Wishing you much success. What does 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. look like for you if you have a consistent schedule? So what's a day in the life of Christina Booker when you're working?
There is no 7 to 5. There is no 9 to 5. It's around the clock, constant. That's one of the things I kind of struggled with as well, because when I was in a business development role, I mean, you're 8 to 5, you're calling customers, you're getting freight, and then you go home and somebody else takes care of it, right? In this case, that's not going to be a thing. And obviously one of my niche is expedited logistics. So I'm there for my customers around the clock. My phone is my hand. I reply to every email, every text within 5 minutes. Like, I'm taking care of my drivers. I'm always available. So no 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's definitely a struggle with when it comes to mindset. But no, I do not have a consistent schedule. I try to have one as much as I can. So I'll wake up early, try to get that cup of coffee, breakfast if I can. And then,
Yeah. And guys, just so you know, there's no difference between a freight brokerage or a real estate company or an insurance agency or a SaaS product. The reality is, when you're a founder and you're in startup mode, you're the chief cook and bottle washer. you're doing it all. That means you're fielding the calls. That means you're solving all the problems. That means you have all those issues. And yeah, it can be stressful. But if you think you're going to come in and start a freight brokerage and just work 7 to 4, or 9 to 5, or anything like that, and you're just going to leave it at the door like a W-2, that's not going to happen.
Right.
Okay. Some niches and some types of freight, like expedited, are way more intense after hours because there's a different level of expectation from a service perspective. Other niches aren't quite that bad, but ultimately you're still going to be able to have to take calls from carriers when there's issues. You're going to have to cover loads when people fall off. I mean, there's things you're going to have to do. Now, the majority of the work, the majority of the conversations, the majority of the transactions, the majority of your business is going to happen between 8 and 5, right? The majority of it. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to have stuff that happens on weekends. Doesn't mean you're not going to have stuff that happens at 10 o'clock at night, because you will. It's going to come up. I promise you. Okay?
And also you're doing the back office stuff. So you're going to have to fill it. You're going to have to find time to do that.
Right. That's another reason why I tell people that if you're not prepared for that, the best gig in town is to start as a freight agent.
Yeah.
You don't deal with any of that back office.
Totally agree.
You're 99% focused on getting customers and supporting customers, and everything else is left to them. Right. And so that's why I'm a big believer. If you don't have a good amount of experience, or you don't have a decent amount of capital up front, start as a freight agent. I'm telling you, 50 to 70% of profit with little risk and little responsibility on the back end is the best gig in town. And we both know agents that are making not just 6 figures annually, but 6 figures a month. So there's a huge income opportunity if you're a good agent. Okay. Now that's not the norm, but it's possible. Right. So, I don't know about you, but I'd much prefer to be making 6 figures a month as an agent than 6 figures a month as a broker, compared to the stress level and the risk associated with being a broker.
Yeah. A part of me is like, why didn't I go the freight agent route again? I did have other plans, some long-term plans, which steered my route, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest value of starting your freight brokerage is that, 8 or 10 or 15 years or 20 years down the road, you have an asset that you can sell if you choose to, right? I mean, it's a sellable asset. Agencies are tough to sell. Okay. They're tough to sell for a lot of reasons, but brokerages, if you have your own CMC, your own customer base, and you've got proven history, it becomes an asset that you could potentially sell or, turn over to your kids or next generation. So, all right, let's move on. Scrolling. The software was called Quote Factory, just for everybody. Here you go. Question. How do you find a company that's truly looking for an entry-level agent? I see a lot of companies listing as looking for entry-level agents, but want you to have a book of business. Okay, so I'll jump in, and then Christina, you can add whatever you want to at the end. So here's the deal, guys. If you are focused on going after talking to the large agent-based companies like my old company, LDI, or some of the larger agent-based companies, we know who they are, right? They almost always are going to be looking for brokers who have a book of business. Almost always, with very few exceptions. Why? Because they've already built a product and a business that can justify that. They can justify someone converting over as a W-2, or maybe they have their brokerage and they want to come into an agent position and kind of take less responsibility. So those big companies have already built those platforms. They don't need to hire brand new, inexperienced agents with no book of business. So your best bet, it's very, very simple. Identify and reach out to companies that have been in business for somewhere between 1 and 5 years, early stage, but have already kind of went through that phase of kind of building their credit up, and they've got a little bit of a system in place for billing and for collections and for all the back office, and sell yourself in as a straight commission broker. Right now, some of those companies are going to be posting job ads, right? And they post them on LinkedIn, they post them on Indeed. So you just filter through the ones that don't require experience or don't require a book of business. There are plenty of them out there. I promise you, I've had over 10,000 students go through my Freight Broker Bootcamp, and I have challenged that all of them on video through email that if you reach out to 50 brokers that are in that 1 to 5 year range, and you offer to work straight commission 50 to 70%, only on what you kill, right? You got to bring it in, you got to move it, you're going to do all that work, and they're going to benefit from it. There have been 0 that have ever come back to me and said that they did not get an agent position. 0. And I'll challenge anybody on here. If you do it, if you reach out to 50 brokers in that 1 to 5 year range, right, that are just kind of looking to ramp. And the reason being is because it's a 0 risk proposition for them. Now, you've got to sell yourself, right? You've got to go in and sell yourself a little bit. But I promise you, there are tons of opportunities out there. But if you're focused on the large brokerages out there, no, they're probably not going to hire you. But the cool thing is once you've been an agent for a year or 2 or 3 and you've built a little bit of a book of business, you could probably go anywhere you want if you decide that you want to migrate to another brokerage, right? If you're not happy with where you're at, you're not stuck there forever. You can make some transitions, just don't sign anything stupid in
Right.
a
Don't
broker
sign
agent
anything
agreement.
without ask somebody before you sign it, and please read
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, no non-competes, no back solicits. Anything that prohibits you from taking your book with you as an agent is a no-go.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you want to add anything to that, Christina?
No, I mean, I think the only thing I was going to add was, if you have to look at it long-term. So a big piece of that is the legal aspect. So make sure that whatever role you're coming into, whether it's agent or, W-2 broker, make sure that you know what you're signing. Because if you do, you're like, well, I don't have a book of business right now. Well, that doesn't matter, because if you work really hard and you get your 5-10 shippers or whatnot, and then you're not happy to be there, you might not be able to take your hard work with you, right? You might not be able to take your relationships with you. So
it's very common in W-2, but believe it or not, it does happen in the agent side of the business too. There are brokerages out there that have, your book is not portable. You can't back solicit your clients. I mean, it's crazy. And I think it's a bad business practice, but it does happen. So make sure you read those agreements. And remember one thing, no deal's better than a bad deal. Okay. Walk away. All right. Cool. Let's see where we're at. I'm just keeping track of time. Do you have any employees?
I had a couple of well, I didn't have employees, but I had a couple of friends who wanted to jump in and help me with a project. It was not really anything too official. It was kind of like an agent role, and they signed like an agent agreement. But once that was over and my freight volumes dropped, it was just me again. And so I do plan in the upcoming year to grow officially with a couple maybe new agents, an operations role, definitely looking at some back office help as well. So not at the current moment, no, but
you're going to be reinvesting.
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. John asked, were you required to have a truck in order to acquire your MC? She didn't buy an MC, did you? You filed a brand new MC.
Yeah, I didn't buy an MC.
Yeah. And you're not required to have a truck to get your broker MC. You'll have to have equipment if you want to have a carrier MC, right? Right. There's different requirements for a carrier MC versus a broker MC. So Christina didn't have trucks. I didn't have trucks. A lot of carriers have both. Some carriers have both, where they have a carrier and a broker. But if you're just looking at the broker MC, you do not need equipment. You won't. As a matter of fact, you can't have equipment if you're just a broker MC. And
I wanted to add to the fact, which I didn't know was a thing, but by government's laws, as a broker, you also don't have to have your own insurance as well. Now, I do. I went out and I did that. I have my cargo, my auto liability, general, whatnot.
Right.
But you are not required to have that. The things that you are required to have are very minimal, in fact.
Yep. Exactly. I'm scrolling through here looking for some questions. Okay. How many sub-agents or operational people do you use? Okay, we answered that one, Ricky. She has currently no agents or operations people, but she's going to be growing that. Hopefully,
I did have it, and for me, I found it fairly easy to find the operations help when I need it, because it's more of like, hey, we're obviously very official, but if somebody doesn't want to be in a role and they want something part-time, but they want to help operationally, that was a better fit.
And you brought them on when you had that project that peaked up where you had a lot of freight. So it was kind of like on demand type stuff. It wasn't necessarily something where it was going to be long term. It was kind of like a project for them too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Is 30,000 more than enough to start a freight brokerage? And can ex-owner operators with 10 plus years experience moving freight make good freight brokers? Christina, I'll let you answer first. This is Ron Skipper.
To the first question, that is way more than enough. Obviously, you want to have as much capital as possible, especially once you start having freight roll in. You never want to not have the amount of money to be able to pay your carriers. So you want to have that, right? You want to have that security. So yes, 30K is more than enough. Can ex-owner operators? I would say yes, absolutely. I think that you have to have a certain amount of skill to be able to be a freight broker. It's definitely a learning curve, especially if you're just jumping in. But it's definitely not impossible. Learn as much as you can when you can and dive right in.
Yeah. And I agree with Christina, 30,000 is more than enough, particularly if you're going to end up depending upon your growth curve and depending upon whether you're going to be using, OPM, like factoring, right? Other people's money, you're going to be factoring. So you have some options. If you're growing very rapidly and you need cash flow to kind of catch up, then you can tap into factoring for that. That's a specialized finance where they'll pay you very quickly so you can pay the carriers. And as far as owner operators, I think people who have experience in trucking, whether they were a W-2 driver or an owner operator, if they have experience there, I think they can do very well. Now they're going to have to learn some skills, predominantly sales. Okay. That will be probably the biggest bridge for them. That'll be the most difficult part. But the reason why I think is because, number one, they speak the lingo, and who knows better how to pick up and deliver a load on time in good condition with no problems than a driver.
Right. And
I've never done it.
How to talk to
I've
other
never done
drivers.
it myself. Yeah. I mean, you're a driver. You've been in the seat. You've had the conversations. You know what the docks look like. You know how to navigate all that. You have a huge leg up. You've got all those miles. You've got all that experience that you can talk about during your conversations. I think people that were truck drivers totally underestimate the importance of that. I mean, imagine being able to have a conversation with a prospect, a shipper, where you talked about these real life scenarios that you've been a part of as a driver, as an owner operator, in all the miles that you've put on. Those types of stories and that type of experience where you've solved these problems and had these issues and you've already seen it, that builds a lot of credibility, as opposed to someone like myself who didn't know jack shit about freight brokerage or trucking, had never stepped on in a truck, had never brokered a load. I mean, most of you right now in this live know more about freight brokerage than I did when I first got started, right? And so, I mean, Christina had a unique experience where she worked as a W-2 inside of a brokerage for many, many years. So she had a little bit different experience. We came from different paths, but the reality is, I do really think that owner operators, now, again, the challenge will be you're going to have some other skills, right? The biggest one being sales, but that's doable, right? So hope that helps.
And it's both carrier sales and customer sales. And if you have experience in the industry being a truck driver, you already have part of that carrier sales in the back. So.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to build rapport quicker with a driver as someone who was a driver than someone who's never been a driver, right? Because you've actually been in that seat, and that's what an owner operator wants to talk to. They want to talk to somebody who really knows, because they don't think that most freight brokers know their ass from a hole in the ground. They just don't. I mean, and if you're a driver, that's unfortunately that's the reality. They don't have a lot of times they don't have a lot of credibility. But if you're a driver, you'll have a lot more credibility coming from that perspective. So especially if you can tell that story. Let's see, and then we're almost done here. If you have questions, hit us up. All right. What strategies do you employ for successful prospecting? We talked a little bit about that, but could you just touch on it really quick?
So
Just the main ones, if you want to talk about those.
yeah, I use Sales Dash CRM. Josh Lyles.
Josh Lyles, my
If you
buddy.
haven't checked him out, go check him out. Great CRM. And the reason I say that is because organization while prospecting is so key. Because it takes several times for you to hit up a prospect, even to get their attention. So just make sure you're organized. Learn the art of follow-ups. Be good at the follow-up part. Make a great first impression, and continue on. Go see prospects face to face. Do your research. Don't pitch slap anybody. You might not leave the best first impression. But also try it out. What may work for me may not work for your personality, right? So, different.
Yeah.
Advice.
So if you want to check out and get a free trial without a credit card for Sales-CRM, just go to freightburgerbootcamp.com/CRM. Okay. You can go there. So you can actually get a free trial with no credit card. You don't have to put a credit card in. You can try it out. You can kick the tires, do whatever you want. It's a CRM. I agree, Christina. If you're going to be doing aggressive outreach to build your business, you're going to need a CRM, because, putting it on paper or trying to do it in a Google sheet is only going to get so far. Okay. So it's a great tool, and I highly promote it because I know Josh personally, and I know Christina does as well. My best piece of advice for getting, what strategies do you employ for successful prospecting? I think Christina talked a little bit about this, and I'm going to add a little spin on it. Do your research, understand who you're contacting. You should never have to ask a shipper what type of products they ship. If you didn't do that research in advance, you're a moron. Okay. You don't call a shipper up and say, "Oh, tell me what you ship." No, you should know that already. If you didn't do that basic level research, you're just lazy and foolish, and you're making a huge assumption. So do some research up front. And then on the other side of it, try your absolute best not to sound like a salesperson. Do everything in your power to sound the opposite of a salesperson. So if you recorded a call that sounded like a salesperson, I want you to sound very different. Okay. And that requires you to be a little bit different, think a little bit different. I mean, I can't, I'm a big believer in having a multi-channel outreach strategy, cold calling, cold email, LinkedIn, face-to-face. I believe in deploying all of those strategies, because it's going to increase your contact rate, which is you're going to have more conversations faster. And so I think that will help. So I hope that helps. And then we're going to do the last question, and I'm going to let Christina go. Oh, there's no more questions.
Okay.
Christina, you're amazing.
Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. The thing I want you to walk away from here with is enjoy your holidays with your beautiful daughter, who's a toddler.
Thank you. And I know you have kids as well.
You've earned it.
Thank you.
You've earned it. And I thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. Let me know if I can ever do anything to help. And everybody else in the audience here, have an awesome day. Have an awesome week. You can feel free to drop your questions in there after we get off. Maybe we'll be able to come back in the future. But worst case scenario, make sure you like and share the stream. And I'll see you next Monday on the next Freight Broker Bootcamp Live.
All right. Thank you for having me.